In the quiet farmland of central Ohio, the mystery known as the Circleville letters began with a single envelope that changed everything. Postmarked without a return address, it arrived in a small-town mailbox in the mid-1970s, written in blocky, uneven handwriting that looked almost carved into the page. The message inside was blunt, personal, and deeply unsettling. It accused a local resident of a secret affair and warned that the writer was watching. Soon, more letters followed, hundreds of them, each one laced with threats, accusations, and intimate details about the private lives of people across the community. The town of Circleville, once known for its annual pumpkin festival and tidy grid of streets, found itself gripped by fear. Neighbors eyed one another with suspicion. Mailboxes became objects of dread. The letters arrived at homes, schools, and workplaces, sometimes tucked under windshield wipers or taped to road signs. Their authors seemed to know everyone's routines, their routes to work, even the color of their cars. The handwriting was always the same: block capitals, black ink, deliberate spacing. There was no pattern to the timing, no clear motive, and no way to predict who would be targeted next. Local law enforcement, accustomed to small-town disputes and traffic calls, suddenly faced a case that felt both intimate and impossible. The letters were not just threats. They were a violation of trust, a slow unraveling of the social fabric that held the town together. When the first letters were reported to police, officers treated them as harassment, a matter that might fade once the sender grew bored. But the tone escalated. Some messages described weapons, others warned of fatal accidents waiting to happen. The sheriff's office began logging each report, photographing envelopes, and dusting for fingerprints. The paper stock was ordinary, the ink common, and the stamps purchased from multiple post offices across the region. Deputies drove rural routes at dusk, headlights sweeping over mailboxes lined along gravel shoulders, hoping to catch someone in the act of delivery. Residents started checking their mailboxes with gloves, afraid of hidden substances or traps. The local postmaster coordinated with postal inspectors from Columbus, who examined cancellation marks under magnification, tracing the origin of each postmark to narrow time windows. The letters were often mailed late at night, suggesting someone who knew the postal schedule intimately. As fear spread, the town's rhythm changed. Porch lights stayed on longer. Parents walked children to bus stops instead of sending them alone. At community meetings, people whispered about handwriting samples, grudges, and old rivalries. The letters had turned private suspicion into public paranoia. Even those who had not received one felt watched. The sheriff's radio crackled with new reports almost weekly, and the evidence room filled with stacks of manila folders, each labeled with a recipient's name and date of delivery. Investigators began a methodical process to trace the source. They collected every known letter, photographing both sides before sealing them in plastic sleeves. Forensic examiners compared the pressure marks left by the pen, measuring stroke angles and ink saturation. In the 1970s, handwriting analysis relied on magnified comparison rather than digital scanning, so experts used light tables and transparent overlays to align samples. They noted the peculiar spacing between words, the squared-off OUs, and the uneven slant that suggested a deliberate disguise. Detectives canvassed neighborhoods, interviewing postal workers, teachers, and factory employees. They asked about anyone who might have access to typewriters or printing equipment, though most letters were handwritten. The town's gossip became part of the investigative record, each rumor logged and cross-referenced. Meanwhile, the letters continued. Some targeted public officials, others accused bus drivers or school staff of misconduct. The sheriff's department coordinated with the state's Bureau of Criminal Identification, sending samples for chemical analysis to determine ink composition and paper source. Results came back inconclusive. The materials were too common to trace. The community's anxiety deepened as months turned into years. Local newspapers printed cautious updates, careful not to reprint the letter's contents, but acknowledging the growing tension. Residents began organizing neighborhood watches, noting unfamiliar cars and late-night movements. The fear was no longer abstract. It was woven into daily life, a constant hum beneath the ordinary sounds of small-town Ohio. As the investigation dragged on, attention turned toward possible suspects. One man, a local bus driver, became a central figure after receiving particularly vicious letters accusing him of personal misconduct. When a suspicious incident involving his vehicle occurred, investigators wondered if the threats had escalated into action. The case took a dramatic turn when a trap-like device was discovered along a rural road, rigged to fire a small-caliber weapon. It was defused before anyone was harmed, but the handwriting on the attached note matched the earlier letters. Forensic comparison linked the device to materials found in a nearby garage, and an arrest followed. The accused maintained his innocence, claiming he had been framed by the true letter writer. During trial proceedings, handwriting experts testified, but their conclusions were contested. The jury convicted, yet doubts lingered. Even after the conviction, new letters appeared, postmarked from distant towns, written in the same distinctive script. The media seized on the contradiction, turning the case into a national curiosity. Television crews filmed the courthouse steps, and journalists interviewed residents who still kept their letters locked away in drawers. The story blurred the line between fact and folklore. Some believed the wrong person had been punished. Others thought the continuing letters were copycats feeding on the town's notoriety. The sheriff's office reopened portions of the file, comparing newer samples, but the trail remained cold. Decades later, the mystery endures. The letters stopped as suddenly as they began, leaving behind a residue of unease that never fully lifted. For those who lived through it, the memory is not of a single crime, but of years spent under invisible scrutiny. Families who once gathered freely on porches now recall how every rustle of mail brought a spike of dread. The case has been revisited by journalists, criminologists, and amateur sleuths, each hoping that advances in forensic science, DNA testing from saliva on stamps or envelopes, might finally reveal the sender. Yet the evidence chain from the 1970s is fragile, and many original items have degraded or been lost. What remains are photographs, transcripts, and the collective recollection of a community that learned how fear can spread through ink and paper. The Circleville case stands as a study in how anonymity can fracture trust, how a single unseen hand can manipulate an entire town's sense of safety. Whether the writer acted alone or as part of something larger may never be known. What is certain is the silence that followed, the empty mailboxes, the cautious relief, and the lingering question of who had been watching all along.